You're listening to Puma Podcast.
In September of this year, we had an episode about the National Commission for Culture and the Arts primer on Filipino values. We're releasing it again ahead of the New Year and Christmas holidays, so you can ask, what is it that's important to us really? It's been a long year for many of us, especially us here in the news. Our economy is recovering rather slowly, the Duterte brand of drug war continues, the Philippines continues to navigate complex relationships with regional powers like China. The disruption caused by the pandemic continues to be felt especially in education, and Metro Manila still ranks among the most polluted and most congested cities around the world in the face of climate change. If you're ending this year feeling the need to recenter and reorient yourself, or you just want to learn more about our shared culture as a people, then this episode is for you. I'm Franco Luna Puma Podcast and you're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode,
dahil ang advocacy naman talaga ng kultura at sining ay mababalikan natin what should be the ground of who we are as a people, and naturally the culture where we had been brought up will find shape in the values that we expose ourselves into. To define yung mga values na to bago magawa ng programa. So that's how it was articulated in the development plan. And in that, how does this connect to its contribution to development?
You just heard Marichu Teliano, Deputy Executive Director siya ng National Commission for Culture and the Arts. We spoke with Marichu about the NCCA's Value Survey and the NCCA's resulting primer on 20 values that matter most to Filipinos. Start tayo sa top 5. Love for family and community, faith, education, lifelong learning, and health and wellness. Pero teka, ito na ba talaga ang listahan? The NCCA says that actually, no less than 189 values were surfaced in focused discussions. The 20 they included in their primer merely represents what were most mentioned. Marichu says these values, quote, reflect the identity and aspirations of Filipinos, unquote. But there are nuances in how these are embraced or manifest.
May mga pagkakaiba-iba ang pagka-articulate nito, pero nagmi-mean lang din siya ng the same thing. However, may iba-ibang mga pamaraan na pag-express or pag-manifest nitong mga values na to. So, with the diversity of our cultures across the country, talagang challenge yung pag-consolidate into a certain number of values that is practiced by a bigger number of communities. Ang isang focus group discussion ay tumatakbo ng halos one day from 6 to 8 hours dahil ganun po hindi po yung conversations.
Next 5 on the list of things we value: addressing basic needs, ensuring work and livelihood, self-development and improvement, happiness, and resilience.
Ang unemployment rate ay naitala sa 4.5% o 45 sa kada 1,000 na individual na nasa labor force ang walang trabaho o negosyo nitong Hunyo 2023.
Government efforts to understand what Filipinos value isn't just about feelings. They are ultimately about economics too. The NCCA Values Program is in partnership with the National Economic Development Authority. NEDA actually tries to factor in these values in the Philippine Development Plan through 2040.
You have to consider that development plans are implemented by elected politicians. They want their policies to be aligned with values that people hold. There may be difficult economic policies, parang painful for some sectors that are powerful pero good for many. And they would like to anchor the narrative and justification for such policies.
Yan si Jude Esguerra, policy consultant. He studied both economics and sociology. He was also former undersecretary of the National Anti-Poverty Commission. Sabi nga niya, values can be tricky to discuss, and they definitely cannot define all Filipinos. Precisely because there are big disparities in socio-economic standings, as he says, some values can even at times be at odds with themselves, depending on the competing interests of people on different sides of different spectrums. Halimbawa, Filipinos believe in assisting the less fortunate, but they can have bitter debates about the limits and thresholds of any such help.
Others hold the value that you have to deserve the assistance that is given to you. No, you have to be autonomous. You have to lift yourself up like we did. No? May ganon, no? Yung universal basic incomes and ayuda are become implicated in values, no? Because there are sectors in society that believe that people have to work more. Kailangan magbanat ng buto, magsipag. I think that's what values survey can bring in, the insight kung ano ba yung binavalue ng people, no? Yung idea of a decent society where no one is left behind, no matter what, or yung that help has to be earned and deserved, no? Dapat sinubukan mo muna at nag-aral ka, nagpagod ka, pero hindi pa rin kaya. Yan, pwede ka naming tulungan, no?
But there are also spaces where our values are completely shared, and those represent clear opportunities for policies and public investments.
Cross-class dialogue should be happening. In transport, public transport, that's another one. No, everyday experience ng both ng middle class at ng mahirap. Diyan, napakalaki ng inequality din dyan. Pero they are in the same space. They confront the same policies. Even those who have cars now, they are affected by the problem because they have to stay very long in their cars. No? Buti pa yung mga nakamotor, mas mabilis nakaka-uwi.
Pause muna tayo. When we return, we'll talk about everything else on the top 20 values noted by the NCCA and a few other things not highlighted in the value survey.
Well, I think that has a lot of currency in the intersection of Filipinos with the rest of the world. Filipinos are nurses. Filipinos are online when you need an elderly needs to fix something. They are in the care economy. And to that extent, it is useful. So that may be on the upside. Siguro that's why the Philippine BPO industry is still number one. Ano? But maybe on the downside, I think NEDA is also aware of this. Kahit sa environment, limited sa very circumscribed topics yung concern for the environment. No?
Again, that was policy consultant Jude Esguerra. Values 15 to 20, according to the NCCA's primer, were care for the environment, love for country, good governance, rule of law, culture, arts and sciences, and creative excellence and innovation. While it's true that things like faith, family, and community have always been central to the identity of the Filipino people, there's also a conversation to be had about lesser mentioned values in the NCCA's focus group discussions. Halimbawa, good governance came out number 17 in the final list. But again, Jude asked, what does that mean? Things can be very different depending on where one stands or moves in life.
Si Professor Randy Tuaño and Noel De Dios came out with an article showing that from 2014 to 2018, yung lower middle class lumalaki na. Ito yung mga newly emerged na mga families from being poor, no? So, like they can afford motorbikes, for example, no? Siguro dahil yung ate nila nakapagtrabaho sa BPO. And it is these people who have started to differentiate themselves from their neighbors. They tend to align with the narrative of the Duterte administration na den of thieves and drug dealers ang maraming urban poor areas. No? I think the fascism of Duterte rode on this effort of the emerging middle class to differentiate themselves.
What we say we value can also shift very quickly, Jude says. As we transition from the Aquino administration to that of Duterte, for example, or from Duterte to current President Bongbong Marcos, and also consider the COVID years. Jude says it's important to remember that our expression of values can be fickle and are often nuanced. We can all be saying the same things, but we can all still make very different decisions.
Maraming values meron ang tao, ang Pilipino, no? Maybe other values lower in rank can come together, no? We all love our friends, no? Filipinos, majority want to support rights for LGBTs, no? Pero so that may be a value plus others perhaps like respect for the autonomy, independence of persons, that if these values are brought together to work in tandem, there can be a very interesting public discussion on these values. It's not a given na porque number 2 ang religiosity or number 1, then it will rule. No, not something that we can take for granted, that we should take for granted. I don't know if people in government think that way, but maybe they should.
It would be impossible to say that any list of values, ayan na tayo. Not even the entire list of 120 plus values gleaned from the FGDs. Unity, utang na loob, values, artists, scientists, cultural workers, security of living. Sa lahat nga ng nabanggit na mahalaga sa mga nakausap, yan pa ang mga least mentioned. But it would be foolhardy for anyone to assume that these are not important to Filipinos.
Ito ay mga, para sa amin ay mga signs or signals that these are the areas that we also have really to work in terms of promoting, in terms of really pushing for paano ba yung articulation, paano ba yung manifestation ng pagmamahal sa bayan. In the study, that's one of really of the things that really is also bringing us to a certain kind of realization in the programming and also of promoting these values that are important yet at the tail end of the ranking.
Whatever values we believe in, how do we work for them?
Edicio de la Torre is a very well-known social activist. Siya yung chairman of the board namin dati for a long time sa Institute for Popular Democracy. And we were talking when he was still in the ERAP cabinet. He told me na there are 2 ways of being a social reformer, sabi niya. The first one is you bring the progressive and the enlightened ideas into the mainstream, into the popular. So you make the progressive popular. The other one is quite opposite, sabi niya. You begin the popular and you try to discover the elements, you tease them out that are also progressive because they are there. That is the work of popular democracy, sabi niya. So that's a way to think also of values and how concerned citizens who have different values from the mainstream can fight for the space so that the society becomes pluralist, accepting, interdependent, and one might say even more democratic than it is right now.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. Our Teka Teka News executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior editor is Veronica Uy. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend. Help Teka Teka News reach more people and keep the show going. Thanks for listening.